Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to chat with you.
Same here, Michael. Yeah, I really appreciate the time.
So you guys are doing some exciting stuff. We're here toward the end of 2022. Sometimes in the holidays, things slow down. Doesn't seem to be the case with you all this year. Tell me what's the latest in the foray into clinical trials. This is exciting. It's kind of a seismic shift.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, I think there's a lot of movement right now around retailers in general finding their way into clinical trials. I think that, the clinical trial industry has been going through a lot of change, especially over the past couple of years, and trying to determine how can we, better serve these communities by still leveraging the academic medical centers and the traditional settings, but how do we, bring patient trials to patients' homes and use some other remote monitoring and these type of things. And I think that the retail pharmacy space, here at Walgreens or others, this is an area where, for Walgreens, we have 78% of the U.S. population within 5 miles of a Walgreens. So whether it's the entire trial or a piece of the trial where rather than traveling all the way to an academic medical center, come to your local Walgreens, we can do some of those follow-up visits, or for simpler studies, perhaps, the whole thing. So we've been moving. We launched our business officially about 4 months ago. And my role is head of clinical delivery operations. My remit is to really look at our stores, right? About 9,000 stores, and the different partnerships and capabilities we have in those stores, and say, where's our best place to start here in order to make the most impact, and to bring, into socially vulnerable communities opportunities for clinical trials. There are a couple other, the 3 service lines that we started off with: the trials to patients, where I sit. There's one around leveraging real world evidence. So obviously we have, insights that we can gain from looking at the records that we have, and also recruitment. Providing opportunities to clinical trial to potential clinical trial participants that are within our network, and then connecting them to local research sites that may or may not be a Walgreens.
Now let's talk about, you and I have talked before, just as well as I do, there's a talent shortage, a personnel shortage in this. There's never been a greater demand than now for clinical trials. Industry struggling to keep up. I know you and I have talked before in the past, but talk about how, this is not a problem you guys can solve by yourselves, but how are you going to help address that? You're going to have some homegrown talent, you're trying to develop people, but talk about, how you're impacting the workforce and increasing demand, which is great in one way, but we need to meet that demand.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, when you talk about doing these type of trials in a retail setting, much like sites, we need the type of staff that can support activities. So, doing clinical trials in a retail setting, much like any other, we're going to need clinical research coordinators, we're going to need PIs, as well as folks to do things like regulatory submissions to IRB, contracting, all of these type of things that support the ecosystem. So what we're looking to do is leverage what's been put in place over the past year, with Walgreens Health. Now we have co-located clinics that are kind of part of our organic business called Health Corners, that have nurses and other clinicians on staff, as well as Village MD and others. I could take the whole time just talking about where those capabilities are. Nice thing is there, we can start to really work with those folks, some who just by serendipity have already had exposure and have some clinical trial experience. But we're working very closely with the learning and development here at Walgreens to try and upskill these folks that are interested, and not just be pulling from, as you mentioned, right, this kind of limited pool of talent, but trying to be more thoughtful about how do we take things like ACRP's competencies and really start to fill those gaps, so that we can train a workforce of our own and provide those opportunities to our employees.
Do you have a sense, I mean, this will be a good problem to have, but do you have a sense of how many people you're going to need ultimately?
Really good question. We have 9,000 stores. Obviously, we're not looking to be in 9,000 stores tomorrow. I do see our business, scaling relatively quickly. It likely won't be a thing where we, put a coordinator and a PI in every single store. So, we're talking, dozens first year and, hundreds, I would say, over time. And I think it's an important thing to note that, we don't want to try and bring all this infrastructure and put it in every single Walgreens. There's a lot that we can centralize here. And honestly, all the major site networks are doing that. When you look at, the big players that are out there, they're understanding that, yeah, we need coordinator PI on site, but we can likely have the contract folks and the folks submitting IRB stuff or data entry folks working centrally to support a lot of different sites. This is where leveraging technology can really help some of those things. So we're looking at that too. What is the field versus central team, which will also help us on the workforce side, so that when we do go into these, medically underserved communities where there might not be as much of a workforce, we can leverage folks that are, working from anywhere.
You just mentioned medically underserved communities, and as well as I do, diversity has been a big issue for years, but especially the last few years. You've got to be excited about the potential. You mentioned, I think 78% of the US population is within a Walgreens. You've got to be excited about the potential to really improve diversity and access to clinical trials for everyone, or virtually everyone.
Certainly. I mean, it's honestly the foundation on which Ramita Tandon, our Chief Clinical Trials Officer, has built this. We're actually, we're setting goals around, what that looks like, and we're going to be accountable for those goals. It's not just about how quickly can we go out and operationalize as many of these sites as possible. And sometimes that's going to make it harder for us in the sense of these are areas that we need to do more infrastructure building. Maybe there needs to be broadband access brought in or other things. But I think it's the right thing to do. And it also is what, the FDA and soon our clients, right, pharma device companies are going to really demand of us as an industry is how, here's our diversity plan. How are we going to meet that? So we're very much excited about that potential, given the wide footprint that we have.
Fantastic. Adam, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's exciting to this initiative, and we really appreciate you giving us an insight and a little sneak peek of what you all are up to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks everybody for taking the time.